Carl and Brendan here from Games, Brains and Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial.com for short. And it's sometimes dead as better as we're going to an old one. What's seen as a classic and certainly has a lot of love from a wide array of audiences, but is also hated by just as many, particularly because it became such a bloated franchise. It is the 1984 supernatural slasher film, Children of the Corn, based on Stephen King's short story of the same name from 1977. Should be stressed here, this is a short story adaptation. And to be fair, the movie isn't that long either. I think it's 80-odd minutes. So, you know, it's not like it's overstaying its welcome. Directed by Fritz Kiesch, the film's cast is made up of Peter Horton and Linda Hamilton in the main two heroic roles. Then you've got John Franklin and Courtney Gaines as the two main villains. Big up Courtney Gaines. That guy is awesome. I love him, and I love that his work continues now, and he is just awesome. Robbie Keeger, Anne-Marie McAvoy, Julie Madalena, and R.J. Armstrong. That is the predominant cast of the good guys and the bad guys, and the odd extra person here, mainly the mechanic. R.J. Armstrong is the mechanic, in case you're wondering why I threw that name in. It's a significant role. But of course, this is factual. There's a lot of stuff about this, so I've got to throw out some of the stuff that's quite important. Mainly this part. King wrote the original draft of the screenplay for this, which I think would surprise some people. And it focused on the characters of Bert and Vicky Moore, and actually was more focused on the uprising of the children within Gatlin. However, that script was thrown away in favor of George Goldsmith's screenplay, which was more violent and featured a more straightforward, conventional narrative. That was what was chosen over King's. Take that as you will. It's King's book. King writes a screenplay that's similar to his book, maybe a little bit longer, a little bit more detail that he wasn't able to do in his short story. I can't help but think, oh, that could be quite interesting, particularly now that I know what we got, you know?
Yeah.
Of course, famously, Children of Corn somehow spawned a franchise of films. We are talking about, right, so I'm going to quickly run through these because I've reviewed them all on the site. I have a soft spot for this franchise. There are some great movies in it. No, sorry, there are some good movies in it. There are some terrible movies. But I want to give a shout out, especially if you know them. Please do check out Children of the Corn 3, Urban Harvest. Has some of the series' best effects because Screaming Mad George was the effects master. And if you know that guy's work, you know his practical stuff is amazing. Check out Children of the Corn 5. I think it's Fields of Terror. Children of the Corn 5, whatever that one is, that's got some generally good scares. I actually really like that film. It's surprisingly good. And check out Children of the Corn Runaway, which is a 2018 return for the series after it had been dormant for a while, which turned out to have some good ideas, and I didn't mind at all. Of course, if you don't know as well, this movie has been remade. Apparently twice. So this is where things get interesting. I knew this film had been remade in a sci-fi TV movie in 2009. That TV movie sucks. I actually think it's worse than the original. And I think the original is a pretty poor movie overall. But the remake is fucking boring, bland, and literally does everything the original did, which is why do that. But when I was doing the notes for this, I discovered that this film has been remade again. Now, I've got to find a copy of this because it seems like it's been remade, but seemingly completely forgotten about and buried. But it was remade in 2020. And I'm like, I've got to hunt this film down. Did you know that?
I didn't know that, but just when you were saying that, so I was just looking there. It says American Supernatural Slasher, written by Kurt Wimmer. It's described by the producer as a free new adaptation of Stephen King's story with nothing to do with the original Children of the Corn.
Intriguing.
And it's like, how can it be an adaptation of Stephen King's story and be nothing to do with the original Children of the Corn?
I'm hoping they mean by that the movie, right? They must mean the movie, right?
Yeah, but the movie was an adaptation of the book, so like by
adaptation.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be really cool if the 2020 one was like, oh, I found Stephen King's original screenplay and we did that.
We'll come back to this. I will certainly, obviously, we like with Pet Sematary, we end up doing remakes anyway, so we'll certainly come back to that. It's Children of the Corn. Look, folks, I mean, I'll be straight up about this. This is a film to me that has aged terribly and gets worse on repeat viewings. I've seen it probably 6 or 7 times now of my life. Every so often I'm like, oh, I'll rewatch Children of the Corn. And each time I feel like it's worse than the last time I saw it. I have a soft spot for this franchise, but I can't ignore this film's issues. The stuff I like, I still do like, but it's wearing thin a little bit now. The more I saw it, and rewatching it as I did the other day with my wife, who hadn't seen it before, I was like, shit, this isn't as good as I remember.
Yeah, it's not aged great.
I think my biggest criticism now is that it just feels so cheesy. It's so cheesy. Everyone in it from beginning to end. The music, the way they attempt to make Korn scary, the effects. God, we'll get to the effects at the end of the movie. And obviously, if you watch the video that I did around Halloween with Liam, where I gave 5 horror movie endings that I hated, you'll know that Children of the Corn was one of them. I cited Children of the Corn as one of my most hated endings ever. I'll explain.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I'll just obviously, because I'll always try and chuck in the book-based part of all of this as well. I would say that often happens, this adaptation takes Stephen King's book ending and decides to go its own way completely. And I find that really crazy. I mean, we get to it when we get to the end. I'll talk a bit more about it, that the director or producer decided that they wanted to go with a more conventional and a bit more of a slasher theme, when actually the ending of this film compared to the ending of the book is massively diluted. But anyway, we'll get to that.
We will indeed. It is, of course, set in the town of Gatlin, which is in Nebraska, a small town with corn everywhere. Corn. And you know you're in for a bad time when the movie opens with the la, la, la music. And you're like, oh, for fuck's sakes. That stuff is Pet Sematary again. So I'm going to drift from the knowledge of the book aspects and try and insert it, not necessarily into the film, but to try and hopefully make sense of what this story is, because you'll be very, very confused as the movie begins showing this town and everybody's been on a Sunday, and you've gotten this voiceover by this young boy who's doing fine. He's got a lot to say here, but he's doing the best job he can, and he's a very young boy. And I'd probably put him maybe 7 or 8 at most, and he's having to do the opening narration. Good on that kid, well done. But basically, all the parents in the town, the adults, got killed by these kids, by the kids of the town. You get this sort of, gory, well, not gory, but action sort of scene in the coffee house where some are poisoned, some get their throats cut, another gets his hand put in a meat grinder, but you don't see that. It cuts away, of course. You get a little bit of blood spatter around the young boy and all that. And this is all while a really creepy looking child stands outside, which of course is Isaac with the black hat and the face and all that. Quickly, of course, folks, if you do not know, John Franklin was not a child. John Franklin was a grown man. However, he suffers from a disease, I can't remember what the name of it is, that makes him look a lot younger than he was. And that is John Franklin, who is wonderful. What do you make of the start? Do you like the opening?
It's kind of similar to other things we talked about. I feel like if you haven't read the book, you may feel like you don't really know what's going on. It's just gone straight in. Like it feels like, okay, it feels like there's maybe a little bit of backstory missing, which you obviously do get in the book. And it builds up to it's not for long. It goes into this pretty quickly. But I mean, I guess I like the fact that the beginning part of the film looks like it's going to be a pretty fucking gory film. See, I would imagine both of our opinions on this are pretty similar, which is that does not end up being the case. But the first part of it is like, oh, okay, fucking hell, all right, they're going for it, that's good.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're like, okay, this is going to be a balls to the wall. It is not that in this slide. So I am going to give you the backstory, what is basically talked about. So basically, Gatlin was a very highly religious town, extremely religious, to the point where their corn crop failed one year, and basically prayer and all of that. Pray to God and maybe he'll fix it and give us a good harvest. That is an important aspect that is basically ignored in this movie. However, this young boy, Isaac, he ended up bringing the children into Gatlin and indoctrinating them in a different kind of religion, a religious cult based around a deity called He Who Walks Behind the Rose. While that is mentioned obviously a lot in this, and that's an important aspect of it too, it's why and how it gets about and how that leads the children to revolution. Because you're thinking, how the fuck did he talk these kids into, because it's implied in the film that he just taught the kids into killing the adults because that'll help the corn grow. You're like, and the kids just went, sure, let's murder the adults. No, It's fucking indoctrination over a long, extended period of time. It's cult shit. He's Jim Jones. He's that. That is what's really missing here. That is the problem. Yes. Also, the other important character is Malachi, who does not, unfortunately, he's a subordinate to Isaac. He will be in the film, but it's early on. You just see him in the background as a person involved in the killing. You don't know why or who and how. He is basically the physical to Isaac's mental, the mind and the body. That's the two together. That's so important. But I don't think the film does a good job of getting that across either.
No, I'd agree with that. Yeah.
What it also doesn't do a good job getting across is why children, the young boy doing the narration, which is Job, and his sister Sarah were left alone. So it at first is just they weren't in the meetings in the cornfield, so they weren't indoctrinated, so they weren't involved in the killings. They're kind of on the outside. Later, the film will imply and try and work around the fact that Isaac wants her left alone because she sees visions, she draws them, and he uses those visions to kind of see what might be coming his way. Again, the film does a terrible job of explaining that. That's me adding it for you through putting the scenes that are all separated, putting it together and going, that's why he keeps her alive.
Yeah, I think all they do, like once or twice, they go, she has a sight. Yeah. And that's it. That's literally it. You go, like she can see?
Yeah, that's it. Also, if you like playing the Stephen King drinking game, drink, because it's a fucking psychic in a Stephen King film. Book. There you go. He loves a psychic. Although it's not set in Maine for once, so enjoy that. Can't be. How did he get around that? Corn in Maine. I don't think they grow corn in Maine.
Oh, fuck knows, to be honest. It's in quite an influential place, though, in terms of the overall Stephen King world.
Yes.
So, like, I didn't really recognize Gatlin, but Gatlin apparently gets mentioned in it. And the other place, Hemmingford, the neighboring town, is where Mother Abigail from The Stand lives.
Yeah.
But also, interestingly, something I'm sure that will come up in our list as well, the more recent Netflix movie, 1922, is set in the exact same place. And there's a lot of corn in that film.
Oh, see, I've not seen 2022 yet. 1922, yeah, I've not seen that yet. That's the, that's Thomas Jane.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I haven't seen it yet, but I've seen, I maybe laughed that he was in another King film. Oh, we'll get to it. So elsewhere, we then do what I consider to be one of the worst scenes in the movie because it's such a waste of time, as we cut to a man sleeping in his bed in his motel room. And apparently someone's going to kill him, as we actually do a kind of scare thing where like someone's creeping up and we see a hand go into a drawer. Oh my God, are they going to pull a knife? And I'm like, well, no, clearly they're not. We've just done a load of murder scenes. We're not going to do another one directly. Who the fuck are these people? But it's not. It's his wife. This is Bert and Vicky, his girlfriend, sorry. Bert and Vicky, and she's celebrating, blows a... What are they called? You blow them out and they go long.
Party thing.
Party popper.
I know what you mean, but...
Yeah. One in the mouth and wakes him up. Quickly, we get a little bit detail about, which is that they're on their way to Seattle, driving to Seattle, where he's going to be starting a new job as Nebraska. As new job as Nebraska, a new job as a physician. I've got Nebraska in the brain now. They're on the way to Seattle. Let's stop here and talk about these two and this scene in particular, because I don't mind either of these actors. Obviously, Linda Hamilton is famous for her incredible turns in the first two Terminator movies, just the first two, nothing else. But that's about it. That's where my interest or knowledge of Linda Hamilton ends. I know she's been in things like Dante's Peak and all that, but I fucking can't stand those movies, so no. Peter Horton, I couldn't name movies he's been in, but he was a recognizable face for me. And I don't mind either of their acting here to a degree. The problem is they have such terrible chemistry. Whenever they're together, not only do I not believe that they're a couple, I also think they don't even really, maybe didn't even like each other on set by some of the sort of behavior between them.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know about on set. I always got the impression that if I didn't know what was going to be coming, that at some point he would have turned around and like backhanded her. Like he was they had that sort of relationship. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there was a bit of a tension, like you said, between the two of them, and like even though I think they're both fine. Like I genuinely, I didn't even most of the way through the film, aside from odd scenes here and there. Like I thought they both did an all right job. To be totally honest with you, I don't know Peter Horton at all. I didn't feel like I recognized him. Obviously knew Linda Hamilton. It's one of those things looking back at this film now. Like I would imagine the first time I saw this film, I maybe haven't seen The Terminator, so I probably didn't know Linda Hamilton is. All I'm doing in this film now is thinking like, oh, she toughens up as she gets older.
You're right.
I don't know. It's difficult to place the years in it, but I think I saw this one when I was pretty young.
I know I would have been young, but Terminator 2 came out after this. I can't remember when Terminator 1 came out, but I don't know.
No,
I can't remember. That's the problem. I can't remember how young I saw
but
Terminators.
I think when I saw Terminator, I don't know. Maybe it's hard to say. For example, like, I don't know if like I would have paid that much attention to who was playing who. That I would have then watched Children of the Corn and been like, oh, look, it's Linda Hamilton. I wouldn't have given a fuck, to be honest with you.
No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
But I think they're okay, and I do get that. I thought their relationship did come across odd at times, but I did feel like a bit later into the film that like it improved. I felt like, like, oh, he's not going to backhand her. He looks like he cares a bit now.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, when things get a little bit more desperate or full on in the town, you've got a good point, because then I would argue and just make a case for this entire motel scene gets cut completely, and we just go to them in the car, and that's when we first meet them. Because
it's got no benefit. It's that whole thing again, isn't it? Like people they cut parts of scripts and leave bits in, and you don't really understand the point of it. If you took that scene out, it's not a long scene, but it's still pointless. And then you just put that minute or two at the beginning of the film to explain what's happening in the town. You got a better film, like.
Yep. Yeah,
makes much more
have
sense.
The conversation about being a physician in the car.
Yeah, while they're driving. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they spend a lot of time in the car. There's plenty of time for it.
Yes, indeed. And we'd also then not have to put up with Linda Hamilton's fucking singing. Honestly, that's what I talk about cheese. Like, oh my God, it looks so awkward. She looks awkward. And you could almost see Peter Horton's face cringing while she's doing it in front of him. It's pointless.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then we get to the car. They're driving in the car through rural Nebraska. I spy might lie, something begin and see. It's corn, scary, and so on. But here, where they kind of drop a relationship thing is they're mocking a sort of preacher on the radio, and she makes a joke about commitment, and it kind of kills the joke dead, as if like she's kind of wanting him to commit to the relationship, and he isn't. And all I'm thinking is, but aren't you moving to Seattle together? Like, it's a bit like, that's quite a hefty commitment. Like, if you're both going to live in Seattle together, I know it's for his job, but she's coming with you, and he wants you to come with you.
Maybe that's just like, because that's our idea of modern commitment, and you're going back like 30, 40 years, man. Maybe she's more like, why ain't we married yet, bruv? Yeah. I'm moving with you. Yeah, where's my ring?
Agreed. And during this, we are cutting to Gatlin, where a young boy named Joseph is planning to leave, and he's using Job and Sarah as his lookout. Hilariously, he tells Job to go warn him if anyone comes. Job goes to the corner of the barn and then shouts so loud, nobody's looking. And I went, well, they fucking are now, you stupid kid. How bad was that? But yeah, Joseph runs into the cornfield. We get scary music suggesting that somebody's in the cornfield with him. He gets approached, and while you don't see him get his throat slashed, you get a splash of blood across his suitcase. And shortly afterwards, as Vicky and Bert are driving down the road, he ends up stepping out in front of the car, and Bert runs him down. Pull over, all that kind of thing. Yeah, this is fine. It's a nice little setup to how we need to get from where we are to Gatlin.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. If there's any problem with it.
Yeah. So he goes obviously to check on the body, and through that ends up discovering that while he might have hit the kid was already dead. And that's cool. I actually really like this because he's a physician, he's a doctor. He would easily be able to recognize what's the difference between I hit a kid and here's someone who's got a throat slashed. Like, he would notice that difference. And that's cool. So I don't mind that. So then it's a big, slow, boring, what are they going to do? Because we also didn't get a weird dream scene where she apparently falls asleep in the front car waiting for Bert, who went to look in the cornfield to see if he'd find any clues. And in it, what doesn't make sense about this is that leading up to the dream scene, we see that she's being watched by the person that killed the boy. But then the dream carries on that part of the story with her then getting attacked by the boys, who sits up and jump scared, and then she wakes up that Bert's waking her up. I was like, that doesn't make any sense because she didn't see the person watching her. We did. So how does that carry into the dream?
I didn't really pick that up as an issue. I mean, I don't know. I guess I just kind of, the boy come out of the corn with his throat slit. Bert's just gone into the corn. Then when she goes into a dream, she's dreaming about someone being in the corn.
It is me nitpicking and me watching this movie too many times. So now I'm beginning to pick holes in things that probably don't need to be. So no, I agree. Bert comes back. He's got the boy's suitcase, and it's like, look, well, we'll drive to a police station and call for help, or go somewhere and call for help and all that. It's all very sensible stuff. It's perfectly fine. It's not an issue. And they end up coming across a mechanic, which is an elderly man, and asks for his help, but he is not wanting them to be around. He refuses. He says he's got no gas, got no phone, tells them that there's nothing in Gatlin, the people there are weird, and just to drive on to Hemmingford, which they, do agree to basically, well, after getting angry, head off. Yeah, this was fine. I didn't mind it. It's clear. We know probably what his role is, but there's no inclination that's the case for him.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, the only problem
I think he acts it all right. You know what I mean? He comes to it's quite a feature, I think, of Stephen King adaptations, is often that you get this one kind of like country old boy played by someone who does like a really good role, like whether it's Pet Sematary or like and I felt like, all right, you know what, come along, it's probably the best actor. It's only in there for a small segment, probably one of the best performance in the film.
Yeah, because he'll shortly die in a really long, drawn-out cat and mouse game. That's one of those. It's drawn out because everybody moves super slow, and it just isn't that interesting. It's right now. It's really easy to pick a hole in this, but later on, I actually think the film does an all right job to explain why. Because you're like, why would they kill this guy if they've been using him to deter travelers away from Gatlin? Why kill him now? He just did what you want him to do. He deterred the people from Gatlin. But it's Malachi that kills him. And I think later the film does a decent enough job of, well, we'll say it now, I suppose. Malachi killed him in defiance of Isaac. That's it. And I actually agree with that. I'm down with that. Yeah,
they've gone two like slightly separate ways with their whole thing, haven't they?
Yeah.
Malachi's the enforcer. He's just like kill everyone who doesn't agree.
Yeah.
Whereas Isaac's a bit more of a pragmatist and is like, well, actually, he's quite useful to have there. She's useful for the site.
Yeah. You've literally named it there. Absolutely pragmatic. Anyway, Vicky and Bert have some trouble finding their way to Hemmingford. So this puzzles me, and I think I've worked it out. So they have trouble following the signs. They keep following the signs for Hemmingford. No, see, it doesn't make any sense. And then
they kept following the signs the opposite direction to Gatlin. There was no Hemmingford sign. It was just that Gatlin was pointing one way, so they'd go the other way.
But they keep getting closer to Gatlin. And that I didn't understand, because my initial thinking was, okay, they've messed around with the signs to, if you follow the sign to Gatlin, you will go further away from Gatlin. So why, when they're not following, you see what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you're right that this doesn't make sense, and actually, that's one of the things that I 100% would have brought up that I didn't think makes sense. I mean, Bert does say when he's driving, like, and they kind of end up like lost or whatever, that like, oh my god, somebody's messed with the signs, right? The bit that I couldn't get my head around, right? So in theory, like, if you'd followed if you turn the sign to point away. If somebody had done that purposely, right? I mean, like, there ain't many people that's done it, right? The choices are quite straightforward. It's going to be one of the kids. It can only be one of the kids. However, we are constantly given the impression that they're all pretty fucking furious that people have turned up at Gatlin. They have an old man positioned to make sure nobody comes to Gatlin. So who's out there changing the sign to encourage people to come to Gatlin? It doesn't make any sense at all. If anything, they would have been keep the signs pointing that way, or take them off completely and put signs on for Hemmingford, because we don't want people to even know Gatlin exists.
That's it.
And that's where it didn't make sense. So, like, fuck knows who was changing the signs. There is no logic to it. I've thought about it for days. I've tried to come up with like routes and plans, like why would it happen? Was it Malachi? But then Malachi didn't want them there either.
Yeah.
Malachi wasn't encouraging people in to kill them. He was killing people that shouldn't have been there, and he didn't want people there. So no sense.
It makes no sense. And this sequence of events is also where you talked about Bert giving Vicky a backhander. I think if there was any time he was going to give her one, it was during this driving segment, as he gets more and more frustrated and keeps snapping at her.
In the corn. Yeah. And they're driving through the corn. Such a weird scene. I found it really odd. Like, I mean, not for the acting or anything like that, but like there's scenes like where he's just driving down a path and then he's like, oh, just reverse back a bit, and then drives like through half the cornfield. Like, it's a straight fucking thing, dude. What the hell? It seems very erratic, that scene. Like,
yeah. And eventually he just gives up and says, you know what? We've got closer to Gatlin. It says it's 2 miles. Let's just go there and forget how weird can they be. But obviously, when they get to Gatlin, they find it effectively abandoned and corn everywhere. They go to the diner from the start of the film and it's filled with corn because corn's super, super scary. But eventually, while driving kind of out of Gatlin, I think they're kind of been like, well, no one's here. Bert thinks he sees a swing door close and figures someone's gone in there. So he gets out the car and they head inside. But inside, they end up finding Sarah alone in a house. She's drawing. So like Bert's like, look, I'm going to go to the town hall now. Why he didn't do that before, I don't know, but whatever. And Vicky will stay behind with Sarah. So that's how we separate the two of them for, well, actually, almost the majority of the film now. Yeah, they're separated now to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, there you go. So we split down into two scenes. So let's do Vicky first. So Vicky at home, Malachi and a group of kids arrive to basically attack her. This is so I've already said praised Courtney Gaines a lot in this. I think Courtney Gaines is one of the best parts of this movie. Playing Malachi at his age, having some fun with it, being given dodgy lines, but giving it his all. But also, like I said, the guy grew up to be a phenomenal actor in many great low-budget horror movies. So I've got, every time I see his name in a credit when I'm watching a film, I'm like, fucking sweet. He's not the best thing because John Franklin happens to exist in this, and I will always love Isaac for his over-the-top behavior. But Courtney Gaines, and here at the bottom of the stairs, when he says, we're here to give you peace, I was just like, that's the shit I'm talking about, man. That's just a good line. So, yeah, they attack, end up catching her. There is one more hilarious scene here where Vicky grabs a lamp to throw it at the kids, and they must be a foot away from her, yet somehow she misses by another foot and hits the wall next to them. And I was just like, you didn't even try. She was told to throw a lamp, and they said, whatever you do, don't hit them. And so she threw it at the wall. And it was so obvious.
Yeah, like miles away from them.
It's terrible. But they capture her and take her to the cornfield where she ends up being put on a cross to be sacrificed, surrounded by kids chanting kill and all that stuff. Now, I think here's a good point, a good time to mention this, because this is where we see the majority of the kids. Now, we are going to call them kids because they're supposed to be, but just have a good look at these children. There are some that are a little bit younger, but they're often the ones not with lines or they're just in the background. These kids are easily late teenagers, early 20s, most of them. And here's the thing. I'm okay with it because of what the film is. What were you going to do? Have literal children screaming kill and involved in violent horror scenes? Certainly not a 984. It's fine.
No.
Silly,
but also, like, I mean, in the book, it's 19, and at 19 is the age that you get sacrificed at. So technically, you can be like 18 and be okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. And that's, with some of them, like, it kind of helps the film a little bit because there are some parts in the film, like some that will come up with Bert soon as well, where you feel like, seriously, dude, just give them a smack. Like, you can probably throw like all 20 of them surrounding you right now around the room in about 2 minutes. Because the thing about these kids is that they are still just kids. They're not supernaturally like strength or anything like that. And you do see some of this stuff as the film goes on that actually, when shit gets heated, that they kind of revert back to being kids a bit. You know, so you see some of these things like when, I don't know, 2 or 3 little kids grab like fucking Vicky or Bert or whatever, and you're just like, it's sometimes not just in this film, but I see it like in other films where they have kids like play things, you know, like demonic things and all that. It's like, it's still just a kid. It's a frail little thing. Throw it across the fucking room. Stop struggling with it.
Yeah.
You know, so I guess with them being a bit older in this, at least it kind of gives a bit more credence to, okay, maybe like 4 or 5 18-year-olds could, you know, grab her and drag her through the corn and that.
Agreed. In fact, I think it's one of the areas the film does really, really well. What you've just talked about there is because I also think the reason why in a short little while, Bert will get stabbed in the upper shoulder. And I thought that was so clever as that weakens his arm. There are still times when he's able to throw some of these people off. For example, when he gets to the town hall, or when he goes to a church, actually, when he sees there are people there, and some kids try to grab him and he just throws them off immediately. And I was like, that's exactly what he's a big man. Bert's not a small man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But here he ends up interrupting a ritual, which is for a boy called Amos. Again, this kid is, well, this young adult he's turned 19. He is really good. He does a really spaced out like I'm indoctrinated cult face really fucking well.
Yeah, I thought it was very believable. Yeah, good.
Yeah, alongside the more psychotic girl, Rachel, who's leading this ritual, cutting a pentagram in his body. Yeah, one look at that and you'll know it's not actually being cut to his body. It's being drawn on his body, but hey, what are you going to do? But yeah, so they kind of get into it here, and this is where you get kind of King's religious dogma stuff, that is anti-religious stuff. Is even Bert goes on a little bit of a rant about the Bible and books and all that kind of thing. But this is where he does end up getting stabbed in by Rachel, and they gets chased out. Haven't been hurt. He has to run, particularly as he realizes they've got weapons. That's a game changer for him. You can only defend yourself so many, but many kids stabbing you with a weapon, not good. Yeah. But when he runs and he hides from the kids and stuff like that, this is a bit too long. There's a lot of stuff where he's just running, hiding, and the kids are running around looking for him and all that. It bores me. It ends with Job rescuing him and bringing him to a shelter where he's hiding with Sarah and learns that Vicky's been captured. However, there is just one good reason. No, is it here or is it later on? No, it might be here or later on, but I'll do it anyway. We get a lot of shots of these kids running kind of like towards the camera, like as it waits and they're running around corners and all that. In one scene, there is one kid who clearly knew that this was the only scene I'm getting. This is the only moment I'm on camera. I'm going to give it my all. He comes racing around a corner, screaming, and it's like 2 seconds. And honestly, it warms my heart every time I see it, because I'm like, that fucking kid knew that this was his moment. And you know, the director was like, oh man, I didn't want you to say anything. Oh, well, we've done the shot now, just move on. And he was like, fucking yes. Loved it. Meanwhile, this is where we kind of get finally a bit more Isaac, because we've not had lots, although there is a scene earlier on where he's preaching in the field when they got Vicky in the cross, and he does this weird thing where he's preaching and we do POVs, but he talks almost directly to the camera and points, which I thought was odd, but it's supposed to be POV, so I guess we were supposed to be like one of the flock.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is where he first gets into Malachi. He's annoyed with Malachi for killing the mechanic. Malachi constantly gives him back chat. It's basically that. A teenager giving an adult back chat. That's what it sounds like. Malachi's all fire and brimstone, whereas Isaac's more like, he is that as well, but he's more like, no, you're going to displease the God. He who walks behind the rose tells me. Isaac's constantly saying that he who walks behind the rose only talks to Isaac. Like, I'm the only one that can speak to him and all that. It's very cult leadery stuff.
Yeah.
Malachi seems to be, if not having doubts, beginning to dispute that.
Yeah, definitely.
To the point that eventually he does snap, having become tired of Isaac letting people basically get away. He can't understand why Vicky hasn't already been sacrificed, and he's never agreed with Job and Sarah being allowed to live. And so he does usurp Isaac, basically. And it is, you know what's really fun? It's done so simply. He pushes Isaac over, pushes him to the floor, because Isaac's way smaller than him. And then when Isaac's all like, seize him, kill him, all that kind of thing, obviously by that point, Malachi has got his own little group together of quite large, bigger boys. So like, no one's going to mess with them, and that's it. He's in charge. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah. So anyway, he ends up replacing Vicky on the cross with Isaac. Isaac goes up, and that he wants to use Vicky as bait, basically, to get the man Bert out of hiding. And during this, you get Isaac like screaming out like, oh, he who walks behind the rose will punish you. You know, I can't do Isaac's speech justice, so I'm not going to do it. The way he talks, the way he nuances and all that. I reckon if you've ever heard of Children of the Corn, you probably have heard jokes about this way he speaks and stuff like that and all that. You kind of got to hear it for yourself to kind of understand it. It's very interesting. But also, when he screams and stuff, he sounds like a whiny kid. And again, it's those touches that I'm like, hey, that's the cool shit. He's supposed to be a kid. He's a kid. We do then get a couple of sequences and scenes involving Bert trying to rescue Vicky on the street and all that, where we get my favorite scene in the entire movie, which is when Malachi shouts, Outlander, we have your woman. I just adore that. Malachi, in my heart for life. Every line is just a joy. But But yeah, we do kind of speed towards night and the potential sacrifice as he who walks behind the rose makes an appearance to kill Isaac in some way. And this is the starting process of what is some pretty horrendous effects, as this kind of glowing light goes over his body and consumes him. And then the next shot is the corn cross like being fired into the air like a fucking rocket.
Yeah.
And it's like, what just happened there? And the effects are, I mean, I know it's 84, but shit was good still in 84. This is not good.
Nah, it's really, really bad. It's funny. It will make you laugh when you watch it when it first comes and consumes Isaac. But yeah, it's really terrible.
It's even funnier if you put the goofy scream sound effect, if you know it, that ooh-hoo-hoo one, across Isaac being shot into the air in that cross bit. That will make that scene way funnier. But, you know, it's not in a film, so you can't do it. But yeah, obviously Bert emerges and wants to rescue his wife. And this is where he gets in a fight with Malachi. And while Malachi is strong and Bert is hurt, the film does this sensibly as well, is he is able to overpower Malachi. He is able to beat him down, snaps him, punches him in the face, and Malachi's down for the count. It's like, yeah, I buy it. Malachi's still just a teenager. He might have been strong and all that, but Bert, as I keep saying, big, stronger man. And in a fight or flight situation. Yeah.
Yep, makes sense.
Bert is then able to convince the rest of the children to, or at least a lot of the children, to kind of abandon the cult, run away, hide, all that kind of thing, as a storm begins to pick up. And then, I don't know, I think the film, I don't want to say goes off the rails because it's been quite nonsensical up to this point, but things certainly go even more off the rails, if you want. As Isaac appears, I guess he's supposed to be dead, but now possessed because he's by he who walks behind the rose, because he talks in a much deeper, nastier voice and basically like points out to Malachi that he who walks behind the rose is angry and that he also wants Malachi. Basically, he's here for Malachi. And then he kills Malachi. And yeah, it's cool. It's just weird. You're like, what the problem is that we've got an entity I don't know the rules around this entity. So I don't get why this is happening.
Yeah.
We get the whole storm scene where Bert and Vicky shelter the children in a barn. And this is, I think, what you were referenced to, where everyone always reverts back to children's, being a child and a ducking and hiding and things like that. It's very childlike.
Yeah, there and just in the one scene, a couple of scenes back, which I thought like was when Bert's in the church just before he gets stabbed by the person performing the ritual.
Yeah,
and he has his rant about this is what they've convinced you. This, you know, that some of the children look like they revert back to children. They're almost like there's a grown-up telling us off here, and they don't all rush him. They don't all try and stab him. They almost look like ashamed and that as a grown-up, you know, have a nice big rant and all that at them until the leader of that church party then stabs him, and that's when it changes. But actually, at that point, if she hadn't have been there, I reckon if he'd have just said to them all, "Like, go to your rooms," that they would have all gone okay and just left.
You're not wrong, because I going back to that as well, like tying that into this part up to the barn, the whole reason why I always felt like the kids listen to him is because he's an authoritative adult, not because the spell is broken or whatever, or anything like that. He's an authoritative adult and they're scared, and he's telling them what to do.
I mean, it also like adds kind of to the whole idea of that these children are like brainwashed in a cult rather than, you know, infected beings with supernatural strength or anything like that. Like as soon as the next influential leader comes along and starts telling them what to do, like you would expect children to do, they're like, Isaac tells us what to do, we do that. Malachi does, we do that. Now did the grown-up tell us? So now we'll all listen to the grown-up. It's almost just like kids looking for a parent.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And here we kind of get the sort of ending sequence as Job gives a Bible. Bert reads a passage from a Bible that Job gave him, which had a highlighted section, which basically amounts to burn the cornfield and you'll kill the entity. There is a thing, we didn't mention it, but I'll bring up here. There is a thing that a police officer had come to the town in the past and attempted to do this. So technically everything was set up and ready to go. But they killed and sacrificed the police officer. This is a huge plot hole in the movie. It is when you simply this: a police officer got killed and no other police came.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense. What?
Yeah, they showed him.
Dave disappeared. Nobody cared.
Cross, don't they? During the film, a couple of different points. I think when Vicky gets raised up on the cross at first. She's like directly opposite him or near him. And I think they show him maybe once earlier than that as well, but they don't really elaborate on why he's there until this point here where they say, oh, a police officer came and did this. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't think no matter how far out in the sticks you are, if a cop goes missing, I think generally there's at least another cop looking for him.
Yeah.
And they usually know where they went last. You know.
Yeah, it's a massive plot hole. It's there, it is what it is. And then we get not really long, but an unnecessarily long sequence of Bert and Vicky attempting to repair the pipe to spray the gasoline, including trying to find the right size fucking bit. And I'm like, why are you showing me that?
Yeah, she's really helpful in that as well. She just comes over with a huge bucket, like a bucket of Lego, pours them all out and goes, try these. It's like, really? You're just gonna throw them all on the floor while you're trying to work and be like, here's 400 more, try one of them.
Yep. It's really unnecessary, but it does eventually lead to Bert spraying a section of the cornfield with gasoline and then getting a Molotov cocktail. Initially, it's done as a tense moment as he throws it and misses. Now, we haven't mentioned this because we'll mention it now because it happens here, but it did happen earlier on. One of the other elements of this deity, this he who walks behind the rose, is that it can also somehow act like a tremor, which is be underneath the ground, like a tremor from the movie Tremors. Yeah. And we see that here as he throws it behind and he misses, and Job runs and gets the Molotov cocktail and he has to do it again, and this time he correctly sets things on fire. But yeah, it's another element where I'm like, what can he who walks behind the rose do? Or what can't it do?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's got quite a wide skill set at the moment. It obviously can control corn and make it like move and stuff. It can possess children, so I would possess Isaac with blue like frog spawn.
Yep.
It can shoot fucking crosses really high in the air.
Yep.
Like you said, it can travel underground, but it never comes out. It never pops out. In all of those times we see it traveling along, at no point does anything come shooting out of the ground or anything.
Nope. We
also know that it can control the corn and like grab onto legs and stuff. It's got quite a wide, and also it can do like a big sort of storm cloud thing. Indeed. I mean, this shit's got like, it's not like a sort of one particular skill set. We go, oh, it's like that type of demon or something like that. It's like, this dude's got some mad skills.
It is, and I'm glad you reminded me, because you just said about the control of the corn, and initially in my head I'm like, wait a minute, when did it control the corn? But you're right, not only does it use it to use almost like binds, but I forgot there's an earlier scene where Bert, as he walks towards the cornfield, the corn separates.
Like it opens up.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
So this Molotov cocktail blows up, and it's a boom explosion. We're not talking about fire here. We're talking like that Molotov cocktail hit something that was explosive, because we do get a practical effect and it's a pretty big explosion. And I was very confused, because I'm like, oh, did it hit the kind of gasoline tank? Well, I couldn't have done that because that was in the opposite direction. I'm like, so is that a demon blowing up? And as if to confirm that, we then get what is arguably the film's worst effect, a really shitty CGI demonic face appear in this cloud explosion, and it goes up, and seemingly that was the end of He Who Walks Behind the Rose. Well, except he wasn't, because like how many movies later, but you know, then.
Yeah.
Can you make sense of it?
Nah. No, I can't make sense of it. I agree with you. Like, I thought the explosion was well impressive, man. Mm-hmm. Especially considering the effects that we've seen up until this point have been very, very basic at best.
Yep.
And then this was like, oh shit. And it goes on for a while as well. But it's not like bang explosion. It sort of continues to roll. Like, yeah, it looks cool. And I liked it for that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for all the demons' different skills and powers or deity or whatever he was, like, obviously not fireproof. I don't understand why it exploded the way it did. But then I guess if the deity can be a cloud and blue frog spawn and all these other things, like maybe it's flammable too.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. Do you know, why not? We needed to get to an ending and we are here. So I said, obviously, at the start was I considered Children of the Corn's ending one of the worst. However, I didn't specify exactly what I meant. I didn't mean that. And I actually don't mean what happens next. As they return to the car, Vicky, Bert, Job, and Sarah, and the car's all wrecked. However, Rachel is hiding in the back seat and tries to attack Vicky, but they knock her out using the car door. And I did like that as well, because it's quite a sort of straightforward knock out kind of thing. And then we kind of get this thing about like, oh, well, we'll have to take Job and Sarah with us. They kiss and Job and Sarah laugh and giggle. And then it's kind of like, let's just leave Sarah where they are. That's how the movie ends. However, what really makes me hate this part is this. It's like they generally didn't know what to do after that. So they just went, roll the credits, fuck it, done. Just roll the credits. Ain't got a clue what to do. We don't need to explain how they get where they're going. They've got no cars. They've got to walk all the way. Don't explain what happens to every other kid in that fucking town. What are they going to do? Don't do any of that. Don't give the fact that that explosion was so big that neighboring towns would have seen it and likely have called the police. None of that. Nope. Just roll the credits. And they even roll the credits over the movie as it continues to play as Bert and fucking Vicky start to get ready to walk off. And that abruptness is so funny to me. That fact that it just feels like, oh, fuck this, we're done, roll. Someone pushed a button and went, we're done. Like, and there was likely more film than nobody gave a shit because we just wanted to be done. That's why it's one of my most hated endings, because it's so fucking, never seen a film end so abruptly without like a whole purposeful abrupt. You know, where it's like someone turns to the camera and says, oh, and then it ends. Like it's supposed to be a cliffhanger. This isn't even a cliffhanger. It just ends.
No, you expect them to get in a car and drive off, and maybe the camera to pan to them disappearing down the road in the distance as the credits start to, you know, something like that to end it. But I mean, that scene up until that point, I quite enjoyed, and that's where I was saying like there are some scenes with Bert and Vicky that I think are quite well. I thought that little scene, give a kiss, the kids laugh, and they do that. Oh, they can stay with us for a couple of days, and then he goes, oh, I suppose so. Then maybe a week, and then maybe a month. I was like, oh, that's actually quite a nice scene. That is. But yeah, I agree. The ending. Just like you said, it just felt like, I don't know, guys, we're really running out of tape here. All right, we're gonna have to stop. Yeah, you know, that sort of thing.
Like they're on the fucking clock or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, kids had to be home for bed or whatever it was. You know, but I mean, the other thing, like you know, at this stage of the film, although it had started a lot earlier, you know, I guess with that back to the whole book kind of conversion side of things, is like I'm now so far away from the book that is unlikely there's anything in the ending that was ever going to appease me anyway. Like, you know, there's no way they're going back to it now. They're keeping in mind that there ain't no Vicky by this point in the book, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we haven't done enough of that throughout. Maybe because it's a short story, maybe because the film isn't too long or whatever. But you know, you've said it yourself. Considering this is a short story, there was always going to be massive amounts of deviation. You have to extend this movie, but there is a lot going on here. And the problem is that the stuff the short story should have included that seemed to have been in King's original screenplay that you felt like could have expanded on and been more interesting than what we got. This ultimately is, when it comes down to it, a very old, very aged, very cheesy, very poorly made overall horror flick that ultimately you're going to have affection for depending upon when you saw it. Showing it to someone fresh now, they're going to probably hate it. My wife, who hadn't seen it before, did not like it. And that didn't surprise me. I didn't like it, but I constantly have this feeling inside me going, but it's Children of the Corn, man. You know?
Yeah, I agree. I have that as well, 100%. Like I never really understood. I mean, I never really understood or like how it had quite the impact it did in that cult following thing. You know, I would never say that I ever felt so into it that, you know, like I felt like this deserves like 9 films and fucking, I think Untold, like even metal musicians reference it, like, and have it in songs and stuff like that. Like it's all over the place. I never got that kind of love for it, but I don't know. Like I feel like it only worked for me because I probably saw it as a kid.
Yeah,
I think I think if you watch this as an adult, it's cheesy. I think it's got loads of problems. Like, and again, like the biggest one for me is just the simple fact that I think this film starts with a bang. Like you said, that first, I don't know what it is, 15, 20 minutes of it in with kids, people dropping, throats being cut, you know, meat grinders, everything like that. And you're like, oh shit. Now, when you said, like, you know, what was it? The screenplay from King was disregarded. because the one that George Goldsmith had featured more violence and a more conventional narrative structure. I didn't get that from this.
Yeah.
And especially not from that start, because, you know, Stephen King, the book, for example, at one point, Bert goes into the corn to try and rescue Vicky, and he finds Vicky up on the cross with her eyeballs removed and her mouth and everything all filled with corn, very much fucking dead. I don't see how that was dropped for him rescuing her and the kids, and that being deemed as a bit more violence to make it more horror.
Do you think? I mean, I didn't see the details, but I do wonder. I'm just wondering if, like, well, that might have been his screenplay. Again, when it came to making it, did it just get chopped to bits and we're like, no, we want to keep this a little. I don't say better, but yeah,
maybe he went to town on it, man. Maybe he wanted, like, you know, we obviously, like you said, there's a lot of scenes in it that we know, like, I don't know, a throat's been cut or this, that, and the other, but obviously they cut from that and they go blood splatter, and we get that. You're not gonna try and kill everybody on screen.
Yep.
And especially children back in like 1984 or whatever.
Of course.
But I guess I just don't understand how this was more violence than the book. That's the thing. I really don't. I don't think this is anywhere near the level of violence in the short story. You know, so maybe it did get cut. Maybe he wanted to go to town and he didn't. The weird thing about it is that even if Stephen King's screenplay had been taken on, I would imagine maybe, who knows, it might have still been terrible.
It might be really dry. You know, really dry.
More like a thriller or a drama or something like that. But I would imagine the ending might have been more in line with the book, and that might have been more shocking, because actually it kind of ends with like a Stephen King book often does. It ends more subtly with Bert kind of lost in the woods and the corn just sort of closing up, and I think it's like Isaac or whatever saying like, "He who walks behind the roses, please," and the film ends and you don't actually know what happens to Bert. So you know, that sort of thing. But I guess if you place this across like more modern things that happen, like, this is a very strange film for a King adaptation, mainly because it has a very positive, happy ending. And that's not always like, look, I mean, at the end of the day, Bert, aside from like a little wound on his shoulder,
everyone gets out alive. Yeah.
Everyone gets out alive. I mean, Linda Hamilton's barely got a scratch on her. I think she's got a black eye, hasn't she, or something like that.
Yeah.
And the two kids that have like Malachi's wanted dead for ages, but like have been kept alive, like they just come out and they're all gonna, well, we presume, drive off in the car and live happily ever after, which is quite a strange thing, both for a horror movie and a Stephen King movie.
Because even the only ones that really die are the villains, the two major villains, you know, Isaac and Malachi. Even
and probably the only real innocent in it is our old guy at the garage.
Yeah.
You know, he's the only poor fucker who gets taken out. So like across the whole film, I mean, obviously we have all the parents and stuff at the beginning, but they're not part of the film as such. They're just setting up the scene, aren't they?
Prologue, yeah.
Everybody else in that town, kid-wise, lives. I don't even know. I think Amos die? Poor Amos.
He walks into the no. Does I can't remember. Does Bert get there before Bert gets there before Amos walks into the corn. He's sacrifices himself, but I think Bert gets there first, and that's when it kicks off.
So I don't even think like poor Amos, who's all desperate to get out there. I don't even think he got to die. Poor chap. So yeah, it's a bit of a strange one when you break it all down. You say actually across the course of this horror film, like one or two people die. Everyone else lived happily ever after. The town's still there. The deity's gone now, but Isaac's still there. So the deity's not technically gone because it's also in Isaac.
Because we have no idea what happens to Isaac after.
Exactly. Yeah, all the other kids are still there, so he's still got his congregation. The corn's gone, but none of the buildings got damaged. Like they weren't exactly living off of the corn. Like, do you know what I mean? So it wasn't for food. So I mean, generally everyone just got together, had a bit of a ruck, then all went their separate ways and lived happily ever after. It's like, what fucking happened? The only poor fucker who died in this thing was the deity.
I think that's the perfect summation of it. This is, of course, Children of the Corn. If you want more violence and gore, there are many, many mental sequels to enjoy. I also wish I'd mentioned at the start, but I must now bring it up. The sixth film in the Children of the Corn series, called Children of the Corn 666, Isaac Returns, is a direct sequel to the original Children of the Corn. That has to be mentioned as a thing to go for people to go see. But we won't be covering any of that because that's not Stephen King adaptations. This is Stephen King adaptations only. Children of the Corn 1 and eventually the remake. For now, though, you've got our opinions on Children of the Corn 1984. What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please help us out by giving us a thumbs up and hitting that subscribe button. If you really liked what you saw, consider donating to keep the website and channel running by buying us a coffee via our coffee page or picking up some merch from our Big Cartel store. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as via our social media, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as listen to our interviews via SoundCloud, Apple Music and Spotify. Just search for GBHBL. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?